This is the Aware Families Podcast, the show that brings you a science-based, practical look at how to use the principles of functional medicine to keep your family healthy. All right, welcome back to this episode of the Aware Families Podcast.
Yeah, I'm one of your co-hosts, Brittany Coburn.
And I'm Tom Flass.
And we are excited to chat with all of you guys today a little bit about the thyroid.
Yep, doing a more of an overview, and we've really tried to dedicate ourselves to keeping this one like 30 minutes or less, although we'll see if that happens or not, but we're trying to keep it so that you get some good information, short period of time, not a huge time investment, enough to kind of just get people thinking.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe even, listen to it while you're in the car.
Because obviously thyroid is a huge topic.
Yeah.
I mean, if you did a deep dive, it could be hours because
that's
there's
just
so
it.
much.
Yeah, you and I could talk about thyroid for a very, very long time. And we have a lot of patients that come here to see us at Functional Medicine Associates that is their main concern, is their thyroid. And sometimes the symptoms that they're having actually are thyroid symptoms and they're just not sure.
Yeah. And it's one of these things where not everything is thyroid, but there's a lot of thyroid issues going on, and it's interrelated. It's one of these, I think, sort of like linchpin type of things that can be affected by other things. And we always talk about the upstream medicine, right? Sort of like what are the root causes, and thyroid issues can affect so many areas of the body, but then we're always looking at what else is affecting the thyroid, because nothing operates in a vacuum, so we recognize that it doesn't always begin and end with the thyroid, but that is certainly something that you need to check on if there are certain issues at play.
Well, and it's one of the pieces that can really impact how you feel, right? And so maybe we have other GI things that are going on, for example, and they're impacting the thyroid with absorption, et cetera. And then, you're really struggling with fatigue and all these different things that can be, downstream effects.
But we've talked about this before too. The flip side is this should not be something where you get started on either a thyroid supplement or a thyroid medication without the proper testing.
100%.
Because how many people have we seen where they've gotten started on something with really not a full evaluation
or follow-up?
Yeah, or follow-up. Yeah. They just get pegged on, and whether it's something like an armor thyroid or a glandular or actual levothyroxine, actual medication. Yeah, without really fully evaluating what's going on with the thyroid, or like you said, following up on it. So we want to, I guess, stress that we, when we do treat thyroid issues, we try to make sure we are evaluating fully and following things.
Very much so.
Very important.
Very much so, yeah. And that's another thing is, and we'll talk about this here in a little bit, but I don't jump into medication right away, right? Like sometimes, yes, it's definitely indicated. Like we'll see, with these labs, oh my gosh, we have to start. But sometimes there's different things we can make, right? With lifestyle changes, dietary modifications.
A little bit of
sleep, supplement, different things, selenium, that we can do that really can make a difference. And then you don't need thyroid medication.
Exactly.
Because often when you end up starting, then it's kind of a lifelong deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's do the 2-second stats.
Yes, do.
How big is it? So this is,
and I like what you printed. So that's what's super interesting.
Yeah. So this is straight from the Endocrine Society. They're kind of the main, I guess, governing body for the endocrinologists, and so they do a ton of research on all things endocrine. But based on and this is from 2024, so this is
very
pretty recent.
Yeah.
So it says for every 1,000 Americans, 8 have overt hypothyroidism, meaning their thyroid is not performing up to standard function.
Right.
So that's overt hypothyroidism, but there's something else called subclinical hypothyroidism, where your thyroid's not operating up to snuff, but yet it hasn't fully manifested yet. But that's 130 out of 100. So
or out of 1,000.
Or I'm sorry, 130 out of 100. Maybe my thyroid's got an issue. So 130 out of 1,000 have subclinical. So these are ones where, unless you're doing the right testing, it could get missed, or you pick these up and you're not sure what to do with.
Right. Well, and I think that is a perfect example of, people will come in and they'll say, oh my gosh, I have every thyroid symptom in the book. And then they go and have just a TSH done and it's normal, right? Quote unquote normal. And so we can see a lot.
So if you do that math, 130 out of 1,000, that's, 13 out of 100.
Yeah. That's a lot.
Yeah. More than 1 in 10.
More than 1 in 10. I mean, so that's a lot.
Yeah. And I don't know if that's common knowledge.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I'll tell you, I don't know. It seems to me like a lot of people will at least have some recognition of thyroid disease, right? Or thyroid issues. But I think all too often that subclinical hypothyroidism is not picked up.
Yeah. And we will talk about the sort of the testing, how it's different in functional medicine. We'll talk about that in a little bit too. So then there's hyperthyroidism. So 5 out of 1,000 with overt hyperthyroidism, where it's making too much.
Yep.
And 4 out of 1,000 with subclinical hyper. So it's much more common to have subclinical, below the radar.
For sure.
Hypo, meaning your thyroid is not functioning up to capacity.
Right.
Than hyper.
Yeah.
So 5 to 10 times more common in women compared to men. And this, with autoimmune disease, it's obviously more common in women. And then they give the costs. So for this is actually kind of older data. So in 2008, thyroid disease treatment cost $4.3 billion for
2008.
Yeah,
wow.
I was like, that's like ancient history.
It's ancient history, yeah.
So,
that's interesting.
Which is weird because this I got from the 2004. So somehow maybe I somehow printed out the older one. Either
way, I mean that's the crazy thing is that I think we're seeing this more and more and more, right? Yeah. And so that's like fundamentally one of the issues. And I think maybe we should really fast kind of dive into what hypothyroidism and hyperthyroidism. I mean,
and what does the thyroid do?
Yeah, right. And you had described about, hypo when your thyroid isn't functioning as it needs to, and hyper if it's over functioning, right? And so some of the symptoms that we can see with that. And one of the big things that I will describe to people is basically when it's hypo, like every system is slowing down, right? And the funny thing is when we look at labs, your TSH goes up in hypothyroidism.
Yep. It's working harder.
It's working harder
to make less.
Exactly. It's like being pushed, right? Being pushed super hard. But all your systems slow down. So we get fatigue. We get brain fog.
Constipation.
I was going to say, I knew you would catch that one. Constipation. Some depression, right? Headaches. Like we can have a lot of things that just slow down. And then hyperthyroidism, we can have more of like the anxiety, heart palpitations. What's the GI
cardiac
one?
Stuff. Well, I guess and it's more extreme. Yeah, more extreme form. Like it could relate to diarrhea. Yeah. But I've also heard a lot of nausea as well.
And so it's interesting though. I've had some kids come in with hyperthyroidism and not knowing, and really some of the presenting symptoms were syncope, or passing out, right? And having symptoms with exercise. And so, but if you're having tachycardia and you're
feeling
arrhythmias,
the heartbeat is kind of
So
thyroid. This is kind of going way back to the basics, but gland in your neck.
Yep. Like a butterfly gland.
But it's
you can't see it though.
Unless you have a goiter. And goiter is basically referred to when you have a significantly large thyroid where it's palpable and visible.
Yeah.
But it's sort of like they call it like the master metabolic gland in the body, because again, thyroid, it makes these hormones, T3 and T4, and those affect, well, it's really, and we'll talk about the conversion a little bit and stuff like that, but there's receptors on pretty much every cell in your body.
Which is why we have symptoms from every organ system,
brain,
right?
Gut, heart.
All of it.
Things,
and that's why it's a hormone, right? And so just like when we were talking about estrogen and that other one, right? We have estrogen receptors throughout our entire body. It's the same thing with hormone. Or same thing with thyroid, which is why I think we really can acknowledge that you can have a wide variety of presenting symptoms, and it can come down to your thyroid.
It's not going to be the same in every person.
No.
It's almost like that. What's the weak link? If you're getting too much or not enough, how does that show up in you? And there's, I don't know if anybody, it's because every person is a complex puzzle. So it depends on what else they have going on, what other, genetic or epigenetic predisposition they may have to certain things. So
right, yeah. And then we have a couple different kinds of thyroid disorders, like you were alluding to earlier too, right? So we have, a primary hypothyroidism, and then we can also have secondary hypothyroidism, and the most common kind of hypothyroidism in developed countries where we have iodine, right, is going to be like the Hashimoto's, where we have this autoimmune component. And
although,
you and I,
surprisingly, with the iodine, we'll talk about that too. It's now with the sort of leaning away from iodized salt in some people's dietary patterns, where they're not getting seafood or kelp or I guess yogurt is also kind of high in iodine. Some of the dairy products, if they're not eating these things, then I think there's maybe a resurgence of some of like the low iodine cause of hypothyroidism. So and it's not to be totally discounted in the Western world.
For sure, because how many times are we buying Celtic sea salt and just these other
non-iodized salt or whatever, because so there's almost like there's the nutritional low nutrition or deficiency induced, and we'll talk about the important nutrients in a second. So there's the nutritional one, the autoimmune, right? That's the Hashimoto's, where the body is attacking the thyroid and interfering with that process. But the autoimmune can go both ways,
I was just going to say, because you can have the low Hashimoto's and then you can have Graves' disease, right? When you have too much going on, and that's when it's really tough to pull it back, right? There's so much thyroid surging
because those antibodies are stimulating the process, and then the thyroid's putting out too much.
Yeah, like that stop sign is being ignored.
Yeah. Constant roll. And then, but there's also the feedback loop, not just from the thyroid, but other things like cortisol and cortisol's effect on the thyroid.
Right. Yeah, and food. Right. And so we can have like all of these different things that are impacting or so the absence of or the, too much of. So, but when we have cortisol in and it's constantly stimulating, then we have thyroid that wants to be on the buzz. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, one of the things that in functional medicine, we always are, again, looking upstream for certain things. It's like when we look at the thyroid, if somebody has thyroid dysfunction, is to start thinking about, do they have either a dysregulated cortisol system, adrenal system, what they call the HPA axis.
HPA axis, yeah. So maybe what we talk about real quick is just some of the labs that we're looking at, because cortisol falls right into there. But so most of the time, I think when people go in and get their thyroid checked, right, if they ask for a thyroid, they're going to check just a TSH, which is just a thyroid stimulating hormone. And what we do here is we do look at that TSH, but then we're also going to look at a free T3 and a free T4 and often a reverse T3 and then thyroid antibodies for just the reason that we just spoke about.
So let's break that down a little bit.
Yeah.
So TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, is, sort of, it's the thing that, it's sort of the, I don't know what you want to call it. The that's the regulating.
Yeah, right.
Step.
So it's from the anterior pituitary gland, and it's stimulating the thyroid gland to release that thyroxine, right, the T4, and then the active metabolite T3, which I can never pronounce the whole word for T3, tyrothyroidine. I think I did it wrong. Yeah. Anyway, whatever. And that's where we're getting most of that available T3. So interestingly enough, when we talk about supplementing thyroid hormone, most of the traditional thyroid out there is just T4. So levothyroxine, Synthroid, right?
Which then relies on the body to do the
convert it into T3 itself. Yeah. And so that's one of the other reasons that we will often check the T4 and the T3. So you need various nutritional cofactors, right, to make sure that your body can convert the T4 into the active metabolite T3 and that it's not going into that reverse T3, which sometimes I explain as like a file cabinet, right? So it's holding on to this extra T3 where we're not really the reverse T3, where it's not getting into the cellular space, and so you don't get the benefit of having it.
It's like a counterproductive.
Yes. But your numbers, your TSH might look normal, and your T4 might be just a little bit on the low side, right? And then we check your T3, and it's like, wait a second, and then your reverse T3 is way high. So there's some different, calculations that we can do because you want to be within a certain range of your reverse T3 and your T3.
And even with the basic, with the TSH, it sounds like the view of what is actually normal
is variable,
and it has changed. It seems like there's some differing opinions on that.
Yeah. So, I mean, standard literature, right? Like if you look at a lab report, it's going to say a normal range is between like 0.49. I mean, and this depends on where you live in the United States, but let's say 0.49 to 4.5. When we look at it functional medicine wise, I look at it and I say, I want to see 0.5 to 1.5 for a TSH for my ideal. And then I'll start checking the other, free T4, free T3 to see where they are. But then there's some literature that's like, hey, don't even treat until a TSH is over 10. So it's kind of a funny ball where you're like looking at so many different recommendations. And that's where we have to get into looking at that full picture. Like you were mentioning earlier, let's look at the cortisol, let's look at the other hormones. Let's check the gut, like what's happening in the gut. Are we nutritionally eating 4 foods, right? Or do we have a wide variety? Are we super high in dairy? Are we super high in gluten? What's happening? How about those antibodies? Are the antibodies high? Like, are we doing some self-attacking?
Yeah, so nutrient-wise, things that are needed by the body nutritionally just to produce the T4, and then we'll talk about the conversion factor. But so iron, and again, iron deficiency is, I think, very under-recognized. Right. So if somebody's iron deficient, they might not be making adequate amounts, and you correct the iron deficiency, and then all of a sudden things can get up to speed.
Right. Iodine, but they could be having symptoms in this time period. So that's the funny part, right? And so just what you were saying, because what are symptoms of iron deficiency? Fatigue.
Brain fog.
Right? Yep. And so there's very similar symptoms. And so we don't want to ever say, oh my gosh, this is totally a thyroid issue and nothing else. Yeah. Because just exactly what you said. Like, it could be multifactorial.
Again, it just doesn't make sense to me. Like, if you are not providing the raw materials in the right amounts that your body needs to make certain things, how can you expect it to make those things? And
100%.
sort of ignoring the nutrition, it's just sort of goes back to basic science. So, of course you need to have enough iron to do this, but also the iodine we talked about, and it's a sweet spot. It's a Goldilocks nutrient.
Yes.
Too much iodine is not good, and will actually be counterproductive and impair thyroid function.
Correct.
And too little iodine, which is, the thing that we always remember getting taught is about cretinism, where if it's a pregnant mom and she's not getting enough iodine, it will cause a severe form of mental retardation, ended up being called cretinism, that was correctable if the iodine supply, because the brain development was so reliant on proper thyroid hormones.
Right.
But in a non-pregnant individual, you still need enough iodine to produce that. Right. And again, it's, I think, dietary dependent, but I know like seafood is it can be a big source. A lot of people aren't big seafood eaters. Certain seaweeds are super high in iodine, maybe almost too much so. You don't want to be like wolfing down tons of it, but but it can also be a good source. But in the landlocked regions, I remember dairy is a decent source, and yogurt is like has a fair amount. A good multivitamin.
I was just gonna say most multis are gonna have some.
Should have enough, like 100 to 200, I think, micrograms, but not too much.
I think so in the multis, yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's different like supportive things that we'll use for the thyroid. That are going to be more specific in their amounts of iodine. Yeah. But I definitely talk to folks about that, because you can have some like breast tenderness that lasts month long, right? Instead of just on that like ovulatory week. So I mean, there's different symptoms you can have when your iodine is a little bit off that we can, assess for or kind of suss out.
And that's testable, but just it's not done all that often, but you look in the medical literature and it is written up in there. It's something that it is capable of being tested to see. Zinc is another common deficiency.
Zinc, yeah.
And also a little a side note, if somebody is on a long-term acid blocker for their GERD.
Like what would be acid blockers?
Oh, so like what they call the PPIs. So your omeprazole, lansoprazole, pantoprazole.
But the other names are going to be Prilosec, right? You know what I mean? What Nexium. So I'm just thinking, like, what are the names people are, because you can get these over the counter now too. So that's the other like really big thing is we have to understand that some folks are coming in on these medications that they've picked up because they do work, but they're not being monitored or followed. So it's just something to be aware of.
And when you're on these medications, we know that your absorption of iron goes down, your absorption of zinc goes down, your absorption of all the minerals, magnesium, selenium, and look at these other factors that contribute to not being able to produce adequate thyroid hormone, low iron, low zinc, low selenium, low magnesium. And it's also known that over 50% of Americans are deficient in magnesium.
Right. So I was talking to somebody about magnesium this morning, and and taking magnesium. There are 6 or 7 types of magnesium, and so there's a lot of different ones out there. And I think you and I kind of use different ones based on what we're going for. I do a lot of magnesium glycinate, magnesium threonate. I don't do as much citrate, just because again I don't know.
It depends if you're trying to get the poop and the rest of the body duality. Because
exactly.
Magnesium citrate can be used for constipation. And, you know, so it can sort of work a couple different angles. But yeah, the other ones I think are glycinate is probably my go-to.
It's my go-to one. I mean, that's the one I you know, and I say take it at bedtime, right? And, you know.
And just eating more magnesium-rich foods.
Oh,
your
for sure.
Vegetables, your
100%.
Whole grains, your
foods that
nuts.
are found straight in nature, found, you know, things that are going to be unprocessed.
And same thing, selenium is also found in those same foods.
Yep.
But selenium
Brazil
deficiency, I think, is not all that uncommon.
No,
not like an overt, but more of like a...
Right.
Maybe I should say insufficiency.
Insufficiency, right, for sure. But you also, again, selenium is where you have to be careful because you can overdo it.
Yep.
So it's another Goldilocks.
And if you're taking a selenium supplement or maybe a thyroid supplement, and then you're also taking a multivitamin, and then you're taking a third thing.
Probably too much.
You got to read, and because people will triple dip
and
not even realize it.
Right. And then it will add
work
up.
against you.
Yep.
So vitamin A is also interesting. Vitamin A, your body will make it from beta carotene, which is what most multivitamins have in it. But they found that not an insignificant number of people have what's called a polymorphism, a genetic variant where they're not efficient at making vitamin A out of that beta carotene, so they would need more in their diet. So there may be more like subclinical vitamin A deficiency than we previously realized.
Yeah.
And some of these nutrigenomic tests we can do
I was just
now,
gonna say.
you can tell if you're one of these people.
Yeah.
But if you're not getting enough vitamin A, because vitamin A is
those
also
are pretty
required.
cool, those tests, by the way.
Yeah.
Where do you order yours usually out of?
Oh man,
Vibrant, I think, is where I've been getting.
There's a couple of them. Yeah, there's several available.
Yeah.
There's like the Insight, and there's a couple
right.
other ones.
But anyways, it's an important thing to know that like we can test these things. Like we can look at this. Like this is data that we can find. But
and then your you know, you need your B vitamins, you need vitamin C, vitamin D, vitamin E, and vitamin D deficiency is also rampant up in the North Country where we live.
Actually, most of the United States.
Yeah, most of the United States.
So truly,
people
it's
are inside all the time.
Yep, it's just because even down south, right? It's so hot.
Yeah.
So
yeah, lack of sunlight on the skin.
Yep.
Vitamin D. You know,
exactly.
So
or
all these
sunscreen.
things could potentially. It's not saying everybody who has thyroid issues has deficiencies in any of these. But shore up the basics. Always make sure you're giving that gland what it needs to make the right.
Exactly. So this is just where we're talking, and somebody's coming in and they're presenting with, you know, say fatigue, constipation, weight gain, right? Because weight gain is a big one that we see when the thyroid slows down. And so, hey, I feel like I have all these symptoms, but my TSH was 3 and they told me it was normal. Okay, well, did we check any of those other labs? No, we didn't. Right? Okay, how about what are you eating? What's a typical diet? Like, what does breakfast look like? Lunch, dinner, right? And we go through all of that because it matters. And if you're eating the very same thing every single day, right, and you're not getting variety, there is a chance that you're missing some of these big nutritional components that are going to work to convert that T4 into the active T3.
Do you know, is there, I apologize if I've not looked this up, but is there has it been studied a link between low protein and and either hypothyroidism or disturbed thyroid function?
Well, we see protein with every single hormonal component, so I would have to say yes.
Yeah.
I mean, estrogen, like all of these things.
Because the amino acid tyrosine, which is obviously one of the building blocks of proteins, and you need that adequate tyrosine in order to make the thyroid hormone. But I don't know if they've linked directly. It would stand to order that it probably
being
would
malnourished, like no protein,
and not necessarily all the way where you're getting like marasmus and kwashiorkor, but like just somebody who just doesn't eat a lot of high quality protein. How much that effect that could have. So
because then you also wonder too if there's that, like, are there going to be these other nutritional deficiencies? Right.
Totally.
So are they all going to be around?
Yeah.
So then we can kind of look at like what are some of the blocks, right? So we just talked about you need these cofactors to transition, right?
Just to make this
just to get your T4 into the T3. But what are some of the blocks that we're seeing, right? So like stress, right? So surprisingly enough, just having this external influence of stress. And remember, when we talk about stress, it's not always bad. It's good too, right? So great, awesome, fun things, pregnancy, marriage, new job, new home, all of these things that are awesome, they do cause stress and they actually impact your thyroid as well.
Yeah, well, especially because it's that is it just the acute where you're like, and then you're kind of your body gets back to baseline, or is it?
It's the chronic, right? Like,
the
so when we have, but if you have this, stress input from all of these things. Some are bad, some are good, but then your body is kind of always in that fight or flight response, right? And you're never resting.
It affects both sides of things, right?
Both.
It affects the production,
Yep.
the function of the thyroid gland itself, and
the ability to convert.
That
and it can push you into that reverse T3.
Yep, exactly.
Right,
and which is sort of like a fake thyroid hormone,
yep.
or it's not fake because your body makes it, but
your body makes it, but inactive. You can't use it.
Yeah,
it's not using it, and and it's one again that a lot of people aren't checking. But we definitely check it.
The infection thing is interesting because obviously having a chronic disease will affect thyroid, but I mean I always wonder about some of these other things like the Lyme thing or any other kind of chronic infections,
right? Or parasites, different toxins. I mean, all of that. Yeah, super interesting. Autoimmune disease, so celiac, we would be remiss if we didn't bring that up.
And all these autoimmune diseases, they kind of travel in packs, right?
I always say they like a buddy. It's unfortunate, but true.
Yeah.
And so rarely do we have one without more than one, right? And that doesn't mean that it'll have to show up, right? Because there's a lot of things people can do to prevent that.
If you have thyroid issues, 100% you need to be screened for celiac.
Great.
If you're still eating gluten.
Right.
And vice versa. If you have celiac, you always need to screen the thyroid.
For thyroid, yep. And, some of those things when we have those high antibodies, I know you and I both talk about this, we talk about potentially removing gluten from the diet because sometimes that triggers and makes, then we're low in all of these other nutritional cofactors as well. And so then our thyroid isn't working as well. Same with dairy. Dairy can be a real bugger because it can slow down the thyroid and make so that your conversions are not working
if you have like a food
adequate.
Sensitivity, like a dairy sensitivity kind of thing.
Right. And some people are fine.
That kind of low-grade chronic sneaky inflammation and some things like that.
Yeah.
But it's also interesting that,
and more with Hashimoto's though, right? Again, not when it's just like one of these other types. So if you don't have antibodies, it's not as
And so the two antibodies, again, that you're checking are
so there's the thyroid peroxidase and
TPO,
then thyroid globulin.
Yep.
And so we check both of those. And I don't check them every single time I do labs. So I'll do them the initial time because I want to know what they are. And if they are high, I am going to repeat them for sure.
Yeah.
But not quickly because they don't come down quickly.
Because it's one of these things, I think it's somewhat controversial, but it's indicating that there is immune activity against the key components of your thyroid gland that are detectable in your blood. So there's something going on.
Right.
And there's some interesting links we'll talk about in a second with the whole leaky gut and gut dysbiosis.
Right.
That's actually getting a lot more airplay in the medical literature.
And on both Hashimoto's and Graves'.
Yeah. Yep.
So that's the interesting thing. I was researching a bunch on Graves' the other day.
Several articles here from 2020. Pretty recently. This one is 2021.
I was going to say I'm pretty sure I saw something in 2023 that was linking dysbiosis and Graves'.
Yeah.
And so really having, so dysbiosis is a significant imbalance in the good and bad bacteria in your gut, and the increased incidence or the worsening of symptoms when you have an autoimmune thyroiditis,
And actually, I think in the initiation of this, and there's some different theories for this, something called molecular mimicry, which, again, is not fully established, but if you're leaking stuff through into your bloodstream through your gut that shouldn't be there, then your immune cells are viewing this as a foreign invader, and they will kind of develop these antibodies and try to attack the whatever it is, food particles or components of your gut bacteria. And then there may be a section of this where that piece of that gluten looks like your thyroid to the immune system.
Exactly.
And then the immune system gets confused and then starts attacking yourself. And so, but that leaky gut thing is that's no longer controversial. I mean, there's like every autoimmune disease studied has a link in an increased risk if you have leaky gut, which is intestinal hyperpermeability, which is measurable by several fronts now. There's something called the zonulin, which Alessio Fasano was the main researcher who brought that to the forefront about 10 or 15 years ago. And now we're being able to order this, what's called anti-LPS. So antibodies to LPS is lipopolysaccharide. It's the outer coating of some of these what's called gram-negative bacteria, some of these gut bugs, and should not be leaking through intact your bloodstream because it's hugely inflammatory. But if you have high levels of these antibodies to this LPS molecule, then the gut is letting stuff through that it shouldn't. And there's a big link in with with autoimmune and that, and the whole healing of the gut thing, all the disease starting in the gut. It's
well, if your gut is
true.
And if your gut is not healed, then you're not absorbing the micronutrients that we were talking about earlier, right? And so we know we need all of these, like I said, iron, tyrosine, iodine, zinc, selenium, magnesium, B vitamins, A, D, C, right? All of those. If your gut isn't intact, you're not absorbing well, right? It's like a slip and slide.
And then when you crank that inflammatory response up, that inflammation is also increasing that conversion to reverse T3. It's as well as interfering with the actual function of the thyroid making thyroid hormone itself. So it's an interesting vicious cycle.
I was just going to say that. It is such a cycle. But then, some of the other things that we didn't really mention yet, where when you're also working on that conversion from that T4 to T3, things that can push you, or that low-calorie diet can really push you, and that's probably where some of that protein deficiency and stuff comes in too. If you're not getting enough and your body is in that fight or flight response, right, you're not, women particularly are not then burning fat. We're storing fat. So
yeah,
it makes the whole thing worse.
Which is not to say that all weight-related issues or obesity or anything, because it's always, the thyroid has taken a hit and a lot of the blame, because but it's so much bigger than that.
Yeah, but could it play a role in most of them? It could, not all. For sure. And again, we're not going to just blame the thyroid for everything, but it was worth looking at.
And maybe not as sort of. It would be nice if everything was wrapped up in a nice, neat package like that. And you just need some levothyroxine and everything magically gets better and you lose weight and all, So
but it just doesn't,
there's so much. But again, it's absolutely worth checking and monitoring.
Totally.
And then what is impacting that and addressing those factors, which is likely to result in positive benefits down the line.
Exactly. I mean, these are the things we talk about all the time, the 6 pillars, right? Yep. Your sleep. Critical, foundational. Like if you're not sleeping, and I get it, and I always feel like it's always hard when we're talking to people, because they're coming in because their sleep is so bad, and they're like, I know it's bad, I know I need to fix it, right?
And so I'm stressed out about my sleep, and I'm not sleeping because I'm stressed out about my sleep.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just again vicious cycle. Exactly. So feel free to go listen to our sleep podcast as well. But it is something that we do a deep dive on here also.
Oh, one thing we didn't talk about yet: the toxic exposures and how, and what kind of things can impact the thyroid.
Right. Well, so all of the toxins that we've talked about in our previous podcast too, right? So environmental toxins, so your mercuries, like all of your different heavy metals, your plastics, microplastics. I mean, too many fragrances, all of those, anything that's going to be a hormonal influence.
Because they call them EDCs, right? Endocrine disrupting chemicals. Yep. I typically always think of like the sex hormones, because the estrogen mimickers and things like that. But they're, and again, I think there's a whole new area of study looking into this, and environmental medicine, which used to be, almost like more like a fringe type of thing. I mean, no, this is the real deal, and we have to start paying attention to how all this stuff is affecting, obviously things like estrogen levels and stuff like that, but obviously thyroid
as well,
hugely important. And we're seeing increases in all these autoimmune diseases. And thyroid, I know it's just one of many, but look at upstream things. What's in your water?
Look at the standard American diet. Look at what kind of water, where are we getting our water from?
The whole pesticide thing, it's not, again, it's not just those other more like sex hormone impacts, that it's it'd be poisoning your thyroid too, so that the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen that
EWG
puts
Environmental
out,
Working Group has a great website.
Looking at that through a thyroid lens too, I think it's all.
It's huge.
So fluoride, also interesting, and because fluoride and iodine are right next to each other on the periodic table, right? And so having too much fluoride looks like it could negatively impact the thyroid. And so, that whole controversy right now with like fluoridated water and, taking fluoride supplements, which I think is, having fluoride in your toothpaste is very different than like pumping fluoride into the water or taking like a higher dose fluoride supplement, which turns out looks like it, among other things, might not be good for the thyroid.
Yeah, too much. Well, like we've said, there's so many of these Goldilocks situations, right? Where too much is not good. In this case, too little, for your teeth benefit would be not good either.
It's a topical effect, right? It's not systemic, so that makes why it makes sense that you can have fluoride in your toothpaste because it's the topical effect, but you don't need to be taking thyroid or fluoride tablets, right? And could that affect the thyroid? I mean, because of that competitive nature between the iodine and the fluoride. Certainly something to consider.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So then when we kind of talk about, so say you go in and you have these labs done, right? And you're like, okay, I actually do have a little bit of a thyroid issue, and whether it be subclinical or not, there are a lot of different ways to look at treating this. And so when we are approaching it here, I know it's not just like, oh, here's a prescription for thyroid medicine, start this, we repeat.
Which has its time and its place, but
it does.
It's
and
not the be all and all.
I give thyroid medications out all the time.
All the time.
Right? So this is not like I don't. But my point is just, I think we need to make sure we're doing this full evaluation. Are we getting the adequate co-nutrients that we need? Are we getting the sleep? Are we getting the exercise? We know that movement is crucial for thyroid as well, right? We've got to pump the blood. We've got to move our bodies. We need to be moving our lymph system. Like, we can't be sedentary. We have to get up and move. And then we talk about, different ways. Like, so I do, obviously, your standards, your Synthroid, your levothyroxine, which you can get at like any pharmacy. Sometimes I do compounding, and I'll combine T4 and T3. I do a lot of that.
And where it seems like there's a subsection of people that do so much better with that than just
and it just depends. T4. But sometimes we can't, it's like we're tweaking it every 6 weeks or every 12 weeks because we can't get where we target. Yeah, it's a constant, and again, from all of these other things we're talking about. But I have found a lot of benefit of doing like the T3, T4 compounds where we can adjust them independently. So I do like that. I do like that a lot. And then obviously we there are meds like NP Thyroid and Armor and all those other ones that are out there too. But then there's also the vitamin piece that I don't think we can ignore. And so I'm very careful to make sure that I am supplementing if indicated, not always.
Without megadosing.
No, we don't megadose. That's not my recommendation.
And kind of a bad idea for certain nutrients too.
Yeah, I just don't think it's necessarily needed. So
and then now looking at this, like, what's going on in the gut?
Yes, right? Yeah.
So you have SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or some other type of dysbiosis that is, among other things, maybe gives you IBS, but as a nice little side effect, it also is messing with your thyroid.
Right. Exactly.
The medical literature would support that 100%.
Right.
That there's a big link there.
So many GI issues. I mean, honestly, so I've done a bunch of different stool testing actually when we're having thyroid issues. Yeah. Just to figure out if there is a
like, I came in for my thyroid and now I have to poop in a cup. I'm like,
but not here in the clinic, just so everyone knows.
Yes. No, do it at home.
This is a home test.
Yeah, it's a home test. But again, it's at first glance you're like, what?
Yeah.
But
the literature supports it.
This is evidence-based medicine. This is absolutely evidence-based medicine.
Right. And so, and you can have, like we mentioned before, there can be dysbiosis, there can be SIBO, there can be SIFO, there can be all of these different, IBS. And IBS, as we know, I mean, we talked about IBS. That can be triggered from numerous things, including stress.
Yeah. Again, vicious cycles.
Right. Sleep, stress.
Something with the gut, messing with the thyroid, which then messes with the gut, and then kind of keep it rolling from there.
Yeah, for sure. So I feel like we kind of, we did a brief overview of thyroid. I know we're going to be really good this time and not talk or yap forever. Yes. So I feel like we could probably wrap this one up.
Yeah, but a good overview. Just again, food for thought that it's a lot more than just like, take levothyroxine, but make sure you're getting the right testing.
Yes.
Make sure you think about all these other factors that can impact the thyroid,
and make sure you follow up.
Yeah, work with somebody who
knows what they're doing.
Yeah, and is taking the full 360 view of your thyroid,
right?
And what else is impacting it, and what else is impacted by it.
Right. And a big thing is, again, I just cannot overestimate this or overemphasize this. You've got to follow up. Yeah. So we make a change, and then I want to see somebody in 6 to 8 weeks. I do not want them to go longer than that without revisiting
your annual, because a lot can happen in a year.
This is not a yearly change. Don't start something and not recheck it. Oftentimes insurance doesn't want to cover it very often, but there's other ways, as you know, that we can do lab checking where you do cash pay, and it's very inexpensive.
Yeah. Yep.
But 6 to 12 weeks, I like to check in at least verbally in 6 to 8 weeks, and then see somebody and repeat labs within 12 at a minimum.
Yep. Information is power.
Yep, for sure. All right. Well, we want to thank again everybody for listening, and thank our wonderful producer Brandy at Triple
Divide
Creative. Thank you.
You always forget one of the words. Triple Divide Creative.
Oh,
Yes. And again, drop us a line if you have any ideas of stuff you'd like us to cover. Again, if you find this information useful, please share it, like it, leave a comment, because it'll help more people to see the podcast. And
feel free to give our office a call if you'd like a visit. We do telehealth and in person, and we'd love to chat with you.
All right. Thanks for listening.
Thanks so much.